wanted to introduce you to Metis. I don't know if you know that chain, but Matt's here from Metis. He was one of our presenters, and he has several NFTs marketplaces that are sort of free gas fees, kind of cross chain on Metis, and they've been super successful. They were a presenter last year at a virtual Infiom Salon, but they've been super successful in total value locked in DeFi this year. I think in what is it, Matt? Like was it 8 weeks? Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead.
Yeah.
You
In
tell
eight
them.
weeks, we racked up $500 million in TVL after launching.
And one of the dexes went up to 1 billion in trading volume in even shorter time, I think.
Yeah.
So we have to convert Chris from Solana to Metis.
No, that'll never happen. I mean, the liquidity locked in Solana just over the last month's $53 billion. I'll probably still stick with that.
Enjoy the centralization, my friend.
You can't be compromised, though, Matt. So this is a big thing. Centralization suggests that something can be compromised or manipulated. And if the supply can't be used to compromise the blockchain, then the concept that decentralization is detrimental, well, it seems irrelevant. It's no different than a 51% attack being nearly impossible.
And what I want to highlight, Matt, now that we're having this discussion, is the that fair launch principle. Can you walk people through that here? Because I just thought that was really fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. So on Metis, we've seen the rise of many protocols doing this fair launch as their come to market strategy. And there's been a few different iterations of how it's worked, but the idea is that instead of doing a bunch of funding rounds that are really open to either high net worth individuals or key opinion leaders or VCs, there is just a single round or at least multiple rounds, but where there is a level playing field. So instead of the typical model of these venture capitalist firms, for example, getting access to these early rounds where the token price is many multiples lower than when the public gets access to it. The idea is to level the playing field in a way just to bring more power to the people and launch in a way that is just more genuinely equitable. So I mean, I can talk about a couple of them briefly. Netswap was one, and that was like a decentralized exchange on Metis. It's actually the first ever native layer 2 DEX, and they're a partner of ours. We incubated them, and essentially they ran a campaign where when their DEX went live for the first month, every time you used it, whether it was a swap or if you provided liquidity and how long you provided it for, there was calculations done that calculated everyone's scores. And then based on the score at the end of the period, you basically got an airdrop of the token, and that was how their token came to market. So that was one interesting way. And now there's one going on for Binary DAO. And essentially what they're doing is incentivizing people to... So instead of just earning the token directly, you basically earn your allocation for their token sale. So you are incentivized to stake your liquidity pair tokens into one of their 5 pools. And in the same way that you rack up points, that runs till the 25th of February. And then at the end of February, basically you'll have a certain amount of points that will equate to how much you're able to purchase of the initial sale. I hope I made that somewhat clear.
I love it. I also want you to talk about the NFT marketplaces. I think they're fascinating as well.
Yeah, definitely. So we have a few NFT marketplaces. There's one in particular that isn't live at the moment, but we are working closely with them, and they're supposed to be deploying by the end of February, and that is curate.style. They are very innovative in their approach. So they're trying to be completely cross-chain, and they have a gasless aspect. So currently they have an app and a website, and it aggregates NFTs across multiple chains. So you'll be scrolling and you'll see, this one's on Ethereum, this one's on Solana, this one's on Metis, and you'll be able to basically transact and buy and sell without any gas, because it's housed on their own. They have what's called the X chain, which is their private blockchain. Um, so that's a really neat feature, and that gasless aspect is kind of their competitive advantage. It's kind of a cost
Yeah, but then
that
like
they're soaking up front.
you just talked about centralization, and this sounds like a private blockchain. That's as bad as Hedera Hashgraph. So my curiosity is, are you using EVM compatibility, or are you guys actually using programming languages? Like, are you using Solidity, or are you actually using programming languages for me to?
Yeah, so we're EVM equivalent.
Right. So then that becomes the ultimate issue over time, is that even if you have a layer two or a gasless solution, there is still a swap or a bridge that happens somewhere. So you either pay the fee for ownership of the item on said chain, or you don't really own it. So there's no private, like, what are they going to do? Atomically swap what? Where? There's still going to have to be a peg token attached somewhere and an equivalent value given on the network that the NFT is derived from. So I actually don't believe that curator.style, I don't believe they can do what they say they can do, because I know that it's not possible. However, the other stuff you're saying does make sense. And then you brought up centralization. So then do you have a proof of work blockchain? Is that what Metis is?
So it's proof of stake, and I mean there's multiple layers that are like building out the decentralization. So are you familiar with optimism?
Well, I guess my curiosity is just, when you called Solana centralized, I was just curious if your blockchain was also proof of stake, because this would be the only centralized thing about Solana, is that it has a proof of stake mechanism. It's a parallel blockchain. It doesn't go linearly like normal blockchains, and I assume yours is like a normal blockchain, a fork of something. So it goes in a straight line, right? The reason we use Solana for utility and applications like NFT and gaming and music is because it runs in parallel. So just like an Intel processor, it input and output multiple dApps at the same time, and it records all those transactions using proof of history and then confirms them within seconds, right? So it's instant. And then yes, there is a gas fee, but it's negligible, 0.0005 cents, so 5,000th of a penny to transact. So then if I become realistic with myself, signing transactions, if a person has $1 in their account, they'll be able to sign 1,000 transactions, right? So then that made sense to me from like a gaming and music perspective. And then 50,000 TPS, that's unnecessary right now. But the fact that you can do that because of proof of history and running in parallels is great. And then you think about compromising a network, like a 51% attack. Well, you can't do that on Solana, because when you transfer Solana from one wallet to another, it actually wraps that SOL, disabling the power of the token during transfer. So you can't use it to compromise the network. And then lastly, you don't use Solidity on Solana. You use Node.js, React, or Rust. And then there's a compatible layer that'll let you use Python and other programming languages. But the reason that's important to the future is because you don't want interoperability through EVM compatibility. You want interoperability to be true through code. Well, if Kusama and Dot have the APIs built in to create interoperability through not moving anything necessarily, just talking between the blockchains, right? Moving data sets, it's a relay chain. Well, Substrate is built off WASM, and Rust can be compiled down to WASM. So if I want a truly interoperable dApp, then it needs to be interoperable by code, not by EVM compatibility. So there is no future in which the greatest utility does not come from Solana. And that is why. But for DeFi and for DAOs, Metis sounds perfect, just like Avalanche. So I don't think people should be creating financial tools and infrastructure on Solana. I think they should be building NFTs and utility on Solana. So totally different prospect, but I think I feel more comfortable with what you're talking about now. So thank you for entertaining my questions.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all really solid info. I'm not a tech background, so you know a lot of that was new to me. So I appreciated the breakdown.
No, you sound like you have a good project and you seem like an honest guy, and you guys clearly did really great value, which means you have supportive investors. And if you're still successful today, that means you don't have any major manipulation. You guys haven't had any major hacks or flaws. It also implies that your network's not compromisable. So, like, when I know that you're still in business today after seeing that kind of volume previously, well, I know you haven't fucked anything up. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
still have faith in you. It's just that my reason for using Solana is singular and it's utility focused. You know what I mean? Other than that,
Hmm.
I believe in Bitcoin and decentralization. My name is Bitcoin is King.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess the aspect of maybe centralization that I was referring to was more in the VC distribution.
That's fair.
You know, like Solana has, I think they raised $1 billion or so, whereas we only raised $5 million from VCs, and we're
Token
really trying to
distribution.
honor the Web3
I'll even
ethos.
back you up harder right now. Sam Bankman-Fried alone owns 10% of the Solana supply. Now, normally that
Wow.
would scare the shit out of me, except for we know who Sam Bankman-Fried is, right? The guy who runs FTX. Now,
Yeah.
if he's got 10% and you know anything about market analysis, that would mean he controls the free float. If it was anybody else that we didn't know their face or their name, I would be terrified. But the fact that we know him, but you're right, centralization when it comes to the token distribution is fine. But I hate to let everyone know that same exact issue actually exists in Bitcoin too, right? And that's why you can see it go from literally 30,000 to 64,000 to 29,000 to 69,000 to 33,000. Why could that even happen? Because there are people over the last 10 years who still have tens of thousands of Bitcoin. So if they decide to sell thousands of Bitcoin on spot and there's only enough liquidity within a certain price range to buy hundreds of Bitcoin, well, then the price is going to tank. And then when you factor in liquidations and you factor in stop losses and bots, now all of a sudden you have a shit show and you have Bitcoin pull back 50% twice in a year, yet both times it makes a higher low. Okay, well, that sounds pretty dangerous from an investment point of view, unless you have faith that over time Bitcoin will prove itself. So I think in your market, that's awesome that from a price perspective or like an investor's perspective, especially if they're entering the space as a newcomer, you're giving them a safer way, which we built tokenomics. I do not have a blockchain. I have no service to offer anybody, but we did design tokenomics very similar to what you're saying, where you do a fair distribution that any one entity or group of individuals doesn't have a greater supply than any other group of individuals, so that ultimately your entire community would have to collaborate against you behind your back to ruin everything, essentially. And you kind of sound like you've created a fair distribution structure that's like that. So from an investment prospect, you probably have a possibly safer ecosystem than some of these other tokens because of distribution. But when I look at centralization, we can go to the Ethereum rich list also and see there are wallets that just have million plus Ethereum in them. And then we go to Solana wallets and see not just Sam Bankman Fried having 10%, but other people having 1% or 0.5%. I mean, millions of Solana too, right? But then you've got Michael Saylor. Michael Saylor publicly has 111,000 Bitcoin or some shit. You know, there are people that aren't public that have 100 and something thousand Bitcoin too. So until all of those distribution phases happen inside of this growing asset where only 3% of the money actually exists, well, how are we supposed to have enough hodlers to prevent the whales from controlling the price? We can't. So all we can do is look at blockchains as a value prospect and find out how over an undetermined period of time they could be financially beneficial to us. So with your blockchain, my thing that I would surmise would say, well, because of fair distribution and because of brutal honesty and liquidity and interest, I could invest in his project and run over a couple years and watch this thing grow and probably be profitable. And if I think about Bitcoin and the way that it gets distributed and how it's money that can't be fucked with, and the algorithm is so pristine for us and it's unhackable, et cetera, then I believe that even with 250% pullbacks over the next 3 to 4 years, I'm going to see a growth in value based on the tokenomics. And then again, this is why I like Solana and why I like Ethereum and Avalanche. But I would never tell someone that they shouldn't build on those blockchains if they wanted to create financial tools. So I think Metis is something I'm interested in learning more about because I do love layer two solutions. I do like financial tool sets. I do appreciate new ecosystems. So I don't want anyone in this room to take it as me being actually like negative in any way about Metis. I'm still very much interested. But this would be my perspective from an investor standpoint, since my actual strength isn't creating NFTs, it's market analysis. And I love that you're putting something out there because I hate Matic. Hate Matic. So if you guys can build a blockchain, whether it acts as a side chain or a layer two solution, and you're able to use code and front ends to hide some of those issues like the bridging, if you guys take care of bridging on the back end, or if curator.style comes out and says, look, there's an associated fee, but we can get you any NFT from any blockchain all aggregated into one space. Well, the only time that's going to be a problem is if you're buying it from ETH. If you're buying it from Solana or from Avalanche or from Matic or from Tezos, there's not going to be much of a fee, right? Even if there is a fee, it's going to be negligible. So I do see the potential in your project and why you guys did so well with your raise and your volume and why Mariana likes it so much. So hopefully me and you are cool, Matt, and you understand where I'm coming from because I totally see where you're coming from, and I think it's
We're super cool, bro. This was great.
This is a good coordinate system, Chris. You always give me like a coordinate system to think about layer ones and layer twos and how it's all impacting each other. So thanks for that.
And for founders, what I really wanted to let everybody know is that's literally the conversation that happens after you pitch an investor. Then they like the idea, they like the founder, they like the this. Then it hits tech check as like the very first part of due diligence. Is it possible? So what you just heard is what the investors hear. So having answers to those questions and weaving them into your pitch ahead of time, like knowing that those are questions that they're going to ask or things that are going to be brought up, when you weave those into your pitch, you've already answered those questions and your likelihood of getting a yes goes up about 1,000%.
why do you think I sound the way I do when I explained my choice?
I
Because
know.
I've had to prepare for all the conversations that I've.
Exactly. That's why I wanted to bring it up, that was like the most brilliant diatribe I've ever heard. And it goes over everything and why. And in the end, you still settled on this is still a great project. It's you have to go through you have to
Am I
go
supposed to
through.
do? Judge Matt at face value and be emotionally connected to Solana to a point where I might hear about a new like a new version of a blockchain, and then I'm so one-sided or emotionally attached to something that I completely negate a possible profit scenario or a new tech, because Metis could absolutely grow exponentially. And from a market cap perspective, I mean, shit, you got to get to like $15 billion to get in like the top 20, and the
Yeah.
dude already had like $1 billion traded at one point. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not
Yeah.
impossible. It's not even close to impossible. It's just like, what is it the best at? And to me, it sounds like it's kind of the best at making some of the hurdles and some of the walls. And forgive me, man, if I'm speaking out of turn here, but to me, based on what I'm understanding, and I'm extrapolating, right? The reason I have this conversation out loud with you guys is because I'm also having it with myself, because I have to be honest about my intent and my beliefs, but his potential and his intention and his beliefs. And with the numbers that he provided, those numbers actually carry weight for a person who is really deep in this space, because if they're able to pull those numbers and he's able to show his face, then that means he didn't do anything wrong and they didn't run a scam. And if they didn't run a scam and they ran those kind of numbers, even if those numbers have dwindled, the fact that he had that kind of derived interest in the first place means that he's on the right path. So if he's on the right path, let me extrapolate what kind of concept might lead him down an even greater path, right? And to me, it sounds like they're removing some of the obstacles that currently exist with other layer one solutions and using EVM compatibility to basically bridge and, I would guess, atomically or unatomically swap things between these networks using probably something similar to like an immutable X protocol, probably similar. That's why it's patented or private or whatever, not your blockchain, but cultures, for instance. So, or cultivator, whatever it was. So if I think about what he explained to me, it sounds like his greatest use case is providing you with more opportunity with less necessity to educate. And if there's less hurdles for you to overcome, then there's less mistakes that you can make. And if you're a newcomer to the space who's one track minded, well, then maybe they can help guide you in a way that's less detrimental and less, like, more cost effective, so that you don't immediately get deterred. Yet they don't take you away from having access to some of the ERC stuff. They don't force you to learn Solana like I do, right? They're kind of leading you down the same path, but in a more defined way. And I think that that in itself has value, unless I've mistaken the project. You know what I'm saying? But I think that's what I'm hearing.
So very interesting. I don't know if we can hear Matt, but I think the interesting thing about Metis is the success they had since launching, and all the DeFi value locked in variety of the projects, some of them that Matt actually presented here, and some that he presented in the virtual Infiom Salon, and also some uptake that they are having with the sale of NFTs. Not to say that that's the best chain or only chain for NFTs, but they do have basically a cross bridge with virtually almost all chains that are kind of relevant at the moment. So that does help with what you're discussing as well.
And
We're
I think that's
also
awesome because you
launching
can
a
put in Metaplex easy. You know, if you guys have the ability to connect APIs and you have EVM compatibility, then if you want to take it a step further and you want to bridge out to other blockchains like an Avalanche, you basically have the infrastructure to do it. Or if you want to make a bridge that is centralized, which would be better, more like a Binance bridge or like a Polygon bridge, so that you don't have like the hacks that we saw with like Polymath or like the wormhole, for instance. You could do all of those things, and I think that's awesome potential. I think that's great utility potential.
yeah. So we have a native bridge. That's kind of what tracks most of our TVL, but we've also got a bunch of third-party bridges to most major chains. And a pretty cool update that should be rolled out, honestly, by the end of this month is an NFT bridge, a native NFT bridge.
Gotta love that, Adrian.
And Matt, I'd like to talk to you or your guys in a different environment about how you plan to do that, because I know a couple things that most people don't, just based on me having friends that are building other bridges right now. But those people are building these bridges between basically from dot outward. But I would love to talk with you and your tech, because there's Affinity token now on Dot's main chain, and it actually allows you to create containers that you can put NFTs inside of, and then you can wrap that container and you can move that to any other blockchain. But the reason that's important is because if you start on Engine, and you could wrap ERC tokens, I guess is what I'm getting at. So you could wrap ERC20 standard stuff or stuff that could be compatible with ERC20. And if you guys are already doing EVM compatibility, then a way you could get an advantage on your competitors, or if any competitors birth themselves around you, the way you could get an advantage is actually by taking your current blockchain and maybe looking at the Polkadot connectivity or the Efinity token and make a bridge between, you're already got the ERC thing figured out, right? So you bridge to Engine, and now you'd be able to wrap NFTs inside of a container and actually move them, the whole data set, to any other blockchain. And it would cost one fee one time. You could have 10,000 items in that container and you pay one fee one time. So if you want to follow me and talk later, I would definitely do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, always interested. And I love what you're saying, so I'll definitely hit you up.
Awesome. I also want to talk a little bit. I mean, it was really exciting to have Matt and the team there because we presented Metis about a year ago before the launch, of the protocol, and I'm just fascinated with the uptake you guys are getting, and kudos to you. But we also have Adrian's NFT drop that I want to talk a little bit about today. Adrian's here with us almost every week in both of our clubhouses, and she's doing something really interesting for all the women in blockchain. So you want to tell us a little bit about Foxy's?
Sure. So Foxy's is a generative art project that drops on Tuesday. Our whitelist is open. It's easy: name, email address, SMS number, and ETH wallet address. Boom. No hurdles to go through. And we do have a 5% affiliate program for anyone who would like to promote. But the project is born out of a necessity to grow our own community of blockchain developers. And there are so many amazing women out there who program for the web or program for mobile, but they're not into blockchain yet. So we're going to go get them. We launch a 10K generative program. Then we launch a trading card program to get people bonuses. And then we launch a breeding engine. And every time someone breeds a Foxy, it kicks off a scholarship for a woman or a girl in blockchain development or entrepreneurship. It is super, super fun. The art was done by my son's best friend's girlfriend when she was 17 years old. She's an amazing artist. And all of these things are going to be brought into the metaverse, which we've already secured our metaverse spot. We've already gotten our lecture halls, and we've already got our instructors being wrangled together. So we are taking on instructors who want to teach blockchain development. Like Chris, I'm totally roping you into this. Although I think yours is going to have to be a masterclass of, thought leadership. And then we're in talks with different universities about creating a fully accredited bachelor's degree. But it is a wonderful project with a very reasonable roadmap and some fun little Easter eggs in there, with a couple of very silly, and I mean like bubble popper silly, play to earn games, just to drive awareness out into the consumer marketplace.
And we have our last presenter. I'm trying to invite him to speak. David Benjamin, who has basically taken the clubhouse around the web. I just don't think he's seeing my invites. But basically, I could tell you a little bit about his project. He's created a browser that allows anyone to actually start a conversation on any web page. Also to kind of uh, tape those conversations. These are all now chat sessions, not audio per se, like a clubhouse. But one thing that I love about the clubhouse are all these, hi, David, all of these smart people like Adrian and, and Chris and Matt, Jeanette, Frank, all these people that we get to talk to every week, Christian, etc. But what's really kind of hard about it is that it's not really a place where you can share a lot of other content that you want to discuss. And I think David changes that with his project. You want to tell us a little bit about?
Yeah. The genesis of of this project was really the lack of collective intelligence on the planet and in the web itself. I acknowledge that the web in some ways makes us smarter as individuals because we have this instant recall for just about anything if we can specify, if it's a fact or something, or something that's kind of divisible and easily described. You can find out a lot about it on the web quicker. And I'm one of these people who's old enough to remember trying to find things in libraries and everything. So yes, absolutely, this is like another memory bank, and it helps a lot. But what if that information is false? What if you can't discern whether that information is true or not? It's indistinguishable between something that's true, true and false. That you can't really tell the difference. Then there's a problem, right? And what if you're not able to find the thing? It's not just something that you can put some words in and find it, because it's not actually something that is easily described. So there's definitely limitations to the use of being this instant recall feature. And my observation is, so it is great to have this, but it really doesn't get us to the next level individually, because in terms of being able to do better from a meaning making or sense making standpoint, and it certainly isn't really helping us from a collective standpoint. And in my view, in terms of collective intelligence, humanity's at a 2 out of 10 or something. And we can do it in rooms like this. We can do it on ClubHouse. We can do it on Zoom calls, but we really don't have the facility to have collective intelligence on a large scale. And that's one of the things that really was interesting to me. And then the other thing is kind of a derivative of that is, we don't have solutions for misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, and we don't have solutions to stop scams. And there's a lot more that we don't have solutions for. I mean, the web is full of problems, but those ones are really, really quite interesting to me. The scams one has lately increased in my interest, just because I've got scammed a couple times in these NFT communities just recently. One was a rug pull, and one was more of a phishing. So I'm intimately aware of the scams now, and realizing that as we go from 1% of the people having wallets to maybe 99 or 100% of the people who are connected to the internet having wallets in the next 5 to 10 years, the scams are going to be off the chart unless something's going to be done. So that's all to say that my hypothesis is that we can't solve the problems that we have today with misinformation, disinformation, scams, and some other things as well, abuse, harassment. We can't solve it with the flat, static web that has basically unlimited throwaway accounts, no accountability. The web of no accountability is what we have right now. And what I'm suggesting is that we need a meta layer on top of the web that has accountability. And if we were to talk about what that looks like, it's going to have 3 different pillars of the pattern. One is safe digital space. So everyone that you encounter within this space is a real person in good standing with the system, but yet at the same time, the individual owns their identity. No one else can dox them. They're the ones who have the private key. It's just that we know, the system understands their history of behavior. And since there's only one account per person, you can't run away from your history, which is what happens all the time now on these platforms like Facebook. So someone can cyberbully someone to the verge of suicide, and yet even if they do get kicked off, if they are able to be found and kicked off, they can start a new account the next day. There's just this lack of accountability for actions on today's web that makes it a very unsafe and misleading place, because people can have I mean, a lot of the virality that we see right now is really driven by bots. uh, Facebook takes down 6 billion accounts per year, fake accounts, and these fake accounts are used to drive a lot of the virality. So the things that we're seeing really aren't driven by their actual popularity, but it's the popularity that they have within the bot world. And so save digital space. You have one account. There's no unidentified bots, no fake accounts, no serial abusers, no throwaway accounts. You're stuck with your account. That's one. Then two is on-page presence. So being able to go visible on any web page and be seen and see other people who are visible at the same time, have a chat with them, look at their profile, see if they're interesting, etc. Then the third thing is on-page interactions. This is the capacity that we're bringing to this layer on top of the web that allows people to create their own smart tags, which can be attached to any piece of content on the web. So I can create a smart tag. In fact, we are creating a smart tag called a bridge. It's my favorite one and where things actually started. But a bridge is a conceptual link between a piece of content on one page to a piece of content on another page with a relationship. And this is created by a human. In the future, maybe AI can support, but we always see having a human in the loop. But so a contradicting bridge could be a, a bridge from a sentence in a news article to a segment of a video where a person in that segment of the video is saying something that directly contradicts what was said in what was written in the sentence that we've highlighted in the news article. And so once someone goes and creates that bridge, and they want to create that bridge because they're rewarded by the value that that bridge creates in the system based on how many people cross the bridge and upvote it. Once someone submits that bridge, it goes to a validation queue. And this is where the relationship, you can have a contradicting bridge, a supporting bridge, a citing bridge. The relationship is absolutely the most important thing. And, this is not a new concept. The ancient people have always said that it's all about the relationships, and I really had taken that to the heart. And what we do when something comes into the validation queue is validate or verify that the relationship between the two pieces of information is correct. So never in this construct with this overweb, at least so far, are we saying content A is true and content B is false, or the claim is true and the evidence is false, or whatever. We're not making those types of judgments. What we're doing is enabling people to say, well, these two pieces of information, they're related. They're either contradicting, they're supporting, or they're citing, and we've verified that that's the case. And now, because of that, because we've verified it, that relationship, we can now drop that bridge, that new bridge, into a universal knowledge graph that connects all these nodes of information with the relationships. And because we know that the relationship is correct, we know that the universal knowledge graph maintains its integrity. So now when you're on a page, and I'll stop after this, when you're on a web page, you're moving your attention, which is your cursor if you're on a desktop or laptop, or it's your finger if you're on a mobile device. As you move your attention towards a piece of content that has associated information in this meta layer, that piece of content that has the extra information in this invisible meta layer will signal. So it highlights and then it pops up a badge with a number in it. That badge is the number of smart tags, bridges, notes, conversations, whatever any developer wants to develop in terms of a smart tag. It That's the number of smart tags that are associated with that particular piece of content. So we're, in a sense, now having the possibility of seeing 360-degree contextual view of everything that anyone thought was directly related to the thing that we're looking at. So it moves from a flat static web to a hyperdimensional web. And the types of smart tags that will be available, I have no idea, because we're going to open it up to developers and people will develop all kinds of things that I can't even think of right now. Yeah, so that's what it is, where it is, where we're at with the project. We've got pilot code for on-page presence where you can see who's on the same web pages. We've got a alpha extension that allows you to create bridges and notes, as well as to have the on-page presence on any website. And we've got a working bookmarklet that allows you to basically click a bookmark to initiate a on-page presence session on a particular website. So we're doing a token raise coming up pretty soon, and yeah, we're excited about getting new pilots involved. So we're looking to online communities, DAOs, and websites that want to build community without the middleman of Facebook.
Wow, that's
Thank you.
fascinating. Thank you, David. So how can people follow and get involved into, in your community today?
The best way is to go to presencebrowser.com. That's PRESENCE browser.com, and then join our Discord.
Awesome. Done. Chris, you had a question? Chris McCartney? You have to unmute yourself.
No, I didn't have a question on it. I didn't know if you wanted me to talk about the upcoming.
Your auction, sorry.
Yes, we're getting ready for two big NFT drops. One is going to be our second one on Wax after our first auction was so successful. We've got another one that's actually next Wednesday. And then on March 3rd, Known Origins is going to be featuring us as one of their premier drops with the sci-fi art collection. So we're really excited about it. The crypto art agency is really getting going. Of course, we're representing the classic sci-fi art anthology, but we're talking to other groups right now. And what the agency is going to be doing is representing art collections that have historical value or are more well known, not just something that's been created, and bringing them into the NFT market. So we're really excited about that, and we're excited about the next two drops. We're getting a lot of press on it, and our sci-fi community is really growing by leaps and bounds. So we'll see where it goes.
You're working with some sci-fi clubs here that I think were formed in Los Angeles and globally in terms of rebuilding that community, connected to this sci-fi art. And maybe you can tell a little bit about the background of the art.
Yeah, you're right. What we're doing is we're pairing up with another person who's real big in the sci-fi community in the sense of all the sci-fi clubs. Comic-Con, of course, is not really a club, but it's very, big and substantial in the whole sci-fi community. And of course, in entertainment, sci-fi is just everything from Marvel to Star Wars to all of the things that are going on there. Yeah, the artwork that we're representing is kind of more classic. The Sci-Fi Art Anthology, which has been a merchandising site and it's been around for since 1998, when the artwork was all cataloged and everything. Uh, we've been doing merchandising for about 10 years. We've been doing licensing agreements, but then we got into NFTs about 6 to 8 months ago. So yeah, the artwork is illustrations from about 1910 to 1970, and of course they're from the books of H.G. Wells and other well-known artists, and then a lot of it is from these sci-fi pulp magazines that were very, very popular in the 1920s, 1930s, up until about the 1960s. So this is kind of the artwork that kind of started all of that what's going on now. These were the inspirations for, Stan Lee, for Ray Bradbury, for all of the artists and the writers of today. So that's what the classic sci-fi art anthology is all about. And it's got 93 pieces of very collectible art. You can go to the site. It's called the sci-fi-art-anthology.com, which is our merchandise site. We also even have an NFT page on it. We've got some landing pages that are connected to our NFT offerings. But then, like I said, that's basically a site where you can buy museum quality art all the way down to the coffee cups and the t-shirts.
What's so interesting about this collection is that you've gone to the management teams of Wax and then I think Known Origin, and they actually have created a marketing campaign to market the auctions, which is fascinating to me.
Yeah, Wax and Known Origins have been great. I mean, I know Known Origins handles a lot of really great artists, but yeah, when we made contact with them, yeah, we've set up kind of a special relationship with each one of them because this is different. This isn't one artist with one set of prints or this or that. This is historically important art. The first piece that we did on Wax that was so successful, it was the auction. It was from a short story called Days to Come. And it was written in, I want to say, the 1930s. And it had things in it about advertising that was video. And it had moving sidewalks and all of these different things. So it was kind of like a really kind of keen, important piece of art. And a lot of the other pieces also are from The Time Machine. Of course, War of the Worlds. We're going to be coming out with that soon, but we've got a whole collection of three very unique illustrations from the H.G. Wells War of the Worlds. One is from 1929, one is from 1934, and one is from 1954. And they're very, very interesting because they do uh, kind of predict so many things and show us, the creativity of what sci-fi was that now the things that we take for granted were actually dreams of those authors then.
And the last thing I think, if you look at the Sci-Fi Club that was just in Los Angeles here,
Yeah.
and the head of the person who was managing that, I think, is working with you on creating recreating this community, if you'd like. That particular club had a lot of the top tier writers in the sci-fi space, but also had Steven Spielberg and John Landis and George. Yeah, it had all
Oh,
of the top tier producers and directors in the spaces.
yeah, yeah. And in fact, you and I've talked about it. The way I got into all of this was I produced a documentary about the club, and it was called the Los Angeles Science Fiction League. And it was started in 1939, and it was actually started by Ray Harryhausen, who's looked upon as the founder of modern day special effects. Ray Bradbury, of course, everybody knows is an author, and Forey Ackerman. And that's where this collection comes from. And Forey was actually an agent of so many sci-fi authors. He printed a lot of books. He was a collector. His house had, I think, over 300,000 pieces of memorabilia from, sci-fi and fantasy works. In fact, I'll show this with you and just close with this. But he had something that was so incredible. He had a first edition of Dracula by Bram Stoker, and it was actually signed by everybody that ever played Dracula in the movies. And I thought that was just, really neat. But that's where he was, and that's where he kind of came from. But yes, that's who started it. And then when you talk to these people like Spielberg, which I have, and Frank Darabont, and George Lucas, and Dennis Muren of ILM, and Phil Tippett, they all go right back to that as being the root of all of what's going on today. And Stan Lee was actually part of our group, and he said the same thing.
Fascinating stuff. So there's just so many components of the space we're in. It's virtually impossible to cover all of them with some of these salons and clubhouses. But there's art, there's entertainment, DeFi, just recreating finance and fintech areas. And when you start looking at the layer protocols like Metis, kind of recreating the playing field, companies like David's company that are trying to, create collective knowledge, coordinate systems. We're seeing just mind-boggling developments of the human knowledge as we speak right here. And we try to bring what we find and what we're able to find every week to these clubhouse discussions. If you have any suggestions for us, back channel me at any point. If you have projects that you want us to highlight, there are NFTs projects. I know Chris has one and Terry has one that we'll be showcasing shortly. If you want to showcase any of your layer 2 networks, any of the DeFi projects, we would love to have a discussion and kind of help entrepreneurs all over the globe figure out how they can create something in the space that's extremely relevant to kind of taking us to that collective knowledge next step that David was discussing. If you have any other questions for any of our presenters, we have like a couple of minutes left today. Otherwise, we will be back here next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Jeanette's going to manage the room on Ask Us anything about DeFi, DAOs, NFTs, metaverse projects. And back on Wednesday, we're going to be in this room creating unicorns with NFTs, DeFi, and DAOs. I think we had awesome presenters today, Adrian and David and Matt. And Pascal's no longer with us today in the session because he's in Paris and it's I think like 11 o'clock at night. But I want to thank you very much for presenting and for educating us on what's possible. And then all of our presenters, Chris and Frank and Jeanette and everyone else on the panel. Thank you for joining us today, and see you guys all next Tuesday.
Thanks, Mariana.
Thank you,
everyone.
Mariana.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.